Imagine for a moment that a visionary billionaire approaches you. He has a proposition. He wants to take your 10-year-old daughter and send her to a permanent settlement on Mars. Now, she wants to go. All her friends are signing up. But here is the catch. The gravity on Mars is only 38% of Earth's gravity. The radiation is intense because there is no magnetic shield. The billionaire admits that her bones might deform, her heart might weaken, and her brain development could be permanently altered by the cosmic rays. He has done 0 long-term safety studies on children in this environment. But he says, hey, she will adapt better than you would. So, Alex, do you sign the permission slip?
That is a hard no. That sounds like a horror movie setup. I would never let my kid go to a planet that would fundamentally break their biology. It sounds completely insane that anyone would agree to that.
It does it not? And yet, according to social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, this is exactly what we have done. We have taken an entire generation, roughly those born after 1995, known as Gen Z, and we have migrated them from the real world, the world our brains evolved for, onto a virtual planet. We sent them to grow up on Mars. And the results, Alex, are in. The deformities are not in their skeletons, but in their minds. Welcome to the program. Today, we are doing a deep dive into Jonathan Haidt's explosive new book, The Anxious Generation.
I have been hearing so much buzz about this book. It feels like every parent I know is talking about it in hushed, terrified tones. But I have to play devil's advocate right from the start here, Sarah. Every generation thinks the next generation is doomed. People thought comic books were ruining kids in the 1950s. They thought rock and roll was the end of civilization. Is this really a crisis, or is this just old people yelling at clouds?
That is the question Haidt tackles immediately. And honestly, the data is absolutely terrifying. This is not just grumbling about kids these days. We are looking at a tidal wave of suffering that has no precedent in history. Haidt presents graph after graph, and they all have the same shape. Imagine a hockey stick. Things are relatively flat or stable for years, and then, boom. Right around the early 2010s, the line shoots straight up.
Okay, shoots straight up regarding what? What are we measuring?
Anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide. Let's look at the numbers. Major depression among American teens aged 12 to 17. The rate was fairly stable until 2011. Then, between 2010 and 2021, it rose by roughly 150%. That is 2.5 times more prevalent. And it is not just feeling sad. The hospital admission rates for non-fatal self-harm, specifically for young girls, ages 10 to 14, nearly tripled. Tripled, Alex. That is not a statistical blip. That is a catastrophe.
Wow. Okay, tripled. That stops me in my tracks. But let me push back again. You said this started around 2012. A lot of bad stuff was happening then. You had the aftermath of the global financial crisis. You have had school shootings becoming more visible. You have the looming threat of climate change. Isn't it possible that Gen Z is just rational? They are looking at a broken world and they are depressed about it?
Haidt addresses that explicitly. And the timeline just does not fit. Take the economic argument. The global financial crisis hit in 2008. If the economy was the cause, mental health should have plummeted in 2009 when unemployment was skyrocketing. But it didn't. Teen mental health actually stayed steady during the worst of the crash. It only started collapsing around 2012 when the economy was actually recovering and unemployment was going down. And regarding climate change or politics, those are global issues, or at least Western issues. But we see this same pattern of mental health collapse hitting at the exact same time in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, and even in the Nordic countries, which have very different economic safety nets and political climates.
So if it is everywhere in the Western world, and it all starts at the same time, Haidt is saying there is only one variable that changed for everyone simultaneously.
Exactly. The smartphone. Specifically, the flip from a basic cell phone to a smartphone with high-speed internet and social media apps. Think about the timing. The iPhone 4 with the front-facing camera came out in 2010. Instagram was bought by Facebook in 2012 and exploded in popularity. By 2015, the majority of teens had a portal to the entire internet in their pocket 24/7. Haidt calls this period From 2010 to 2015, the Great Rewiring of Childhood.
The Great Rewiring. That sounds ominous. It implies that we physically changed how kids are built.
In a way, we did. We changed how their brains develop. And this brings us to the core conflict of the book. Haidt argues that childhood has two modes. For all of human history, up until about the 1990s, we had a play-based childhood. Kids played outside. They were unsupervised. They scraped their knees. They resolved their own arguments. But then, we slowly replaced that with a phone-based childhood.
Okay, hold on. Before we get to the phones, you mentioned the 1990s. Smartphones didn't exist then. So how did the rewiring start back then?
That is the backstory, and it is crucial. Before we gave kids the poison of unchecked social media, we weakened their immune systems. In the 1980s and 90s, we saw the rise of what Haidt calls safetyism. Parents started getting scared. We had the 24-hour news cycle broadcasting stories of abductions and crime, even though crime rates were actually dropping. We stopped letting kids roam. We stopped letting them walk to school. We locked them inside.
I remember this. Stranger danger. I grew up in the 80s, and we were outside until the streetlights came on. But by the time my nephews were growing up in the 2000s, their entire lives were scheduled. Soccer practice, piano, tutoring. No, just hanging out.
Precisely. And that loss of free play is devastating. Haidt explains that play is not just fun. It is the work of childhood. It is how mammals wire their brains. When kittens pounce on each other, they are learning hunting skills. When human kids play tag or negotiate the rules of a game without adults, they are learning social skills, conflict resolution, and emotional regulation.
So if you have an adult refereeing every interaction, the kid never learns how to handle a dispute?
Right. They become dependent on authority to solve problems. And this leads to a concept Haidt uses called anti-fragility. It is a term from Nassim Taleb. You know how a glass is fragile? If you drop it, it breaks. A plastic cup is resilient. It doesn't break, but it doesn't get better. But something that is anti-fragile actually gets stronger when you stress it.
Like the immune system. You need exposure to germs to get strong.
Exactly. And Haidt uses the metaphor of trees in the Biosphere 2 project. Did you know they tried to grow trees inside a giant glass dome, but the trees kept falling over before they reached maturity?
No, really. Why?
Because there was no wind. Young trees need wind to buffet them around. That stress causes them to grow reaction wood, which is structurally different and much stronger. Without the stress of the wind, they couldn't support their own weight. Our children are like those trees. We protected them from the wind of the real world, from risk, from failure, from getting lost, from minor injuries, so they never developed the reaction wood. They became fragile. And then, right when they were at their most vulnerable, we handed them the smartphone.
That is a powerful image. The windless greenhouse. So we have these fragile kids, and then we introduce the phone. Haidt calls smartphones experience blockers. What does he mean by that? Because I can hear a tech enthusiast saying, wait, a phone gives you access to the whole world? That is infinite experience.
It gives you access to information, but it blocks the kinds of experiences our ancient brains need to develop. He talks about 4 features of real-world relationships. They are embodied, synchronous, one-to-one, and take place in communities with a high bar for entry and exit. Online interactions are disembodied. No body language, no touch. They are asynchronous, you text and wait. And they are low stakes, you can block someone or ghost them instantly. When a kid spends 7 to 9 hours a day on a screen, which is the average now, that is 7 to 9 hours they are not spending looking into someone's eyes, reading facial cues, or feeling the physical presence of a friend. That is a massive deficit in social nutrition.
Social nutrition. I like that. It's like we are feeding them social junk food. It tastes good, it triggers the dopamine, but it leaves you malnourished. But Sarah, let's break this down by gender. You mentioned earlier that the suicide and self-harm rates skyrocketed for girls specifically. Why is the phone-based childhood hitting girls so much harder?
This is one of the most disturbing parts of the book. Haidt argues that social media is particularly designed to exploit the vulnerabilities of the female adolescent brain. Girls are typically more focused on visual social comparison and emotional standing within a group. Platforms like Instagram are visual perfection engines. A girl in 2012 wasn't just comparing herself to the prettiest girl in school. She was comparing herself to the prettiest, most filtered, most curated girls in the world, 24/7.
And the FOMO, fear of missing out, must be rampant. If you see all your friends at a party you weren't invited to, that hurts.
It is agonizing, and it is also about aggression. Boys tend to be physically aggressive. If they have a beef, they might shove each other, and then it is over. Girls tend to use relational aggression, damaging someone's reputation or relationships. Social media is the ultimate weapon for relational aggression. It allows for public shaming, exclusion, and bullying on a scale that is impossible to escape. You can't just go home and be safe. The bully is in your pocket.
That is a nightmare. But what about the boys? The data showed their depression rates rising too, but not as sharply. What is happening to them?
Boys are retreating. While girls are getting anxious and depressed from hyper-social engagement, boys are slowly withdrawing from the real world entirely. They are falling into what Haidt calls the void: video games, pornography, and Reddit. They are opting out of the difficult, risky game of real-world achievement and romance. Why risk rejection asking a girl out when you have free, hardcore pornography available instantly? Why risk failing at sports when you can be a god in a video game? We are seeing a crisis of motivation, a failure to launch where young men are just drifting.
It is like we are short-circuiting their evolutionary drives. The drive to achieve, the drive to find a mate, it is all being sated by pixels. Okay, this is bleak. We have fragile kids, poisoned by social media, retreating from reality. But Haidt talks about a specific biological window where this damage happens: puberty.
Yes. This is the deep dive part 3. We need to understand the biology. Humans have this weird growth pattern: fast, slow, fast. We have a long childhood to learn culture, and then puberty hits. It is not just about growing hair and getting taller. The brain goes into a massive remodeling phase. It is pruning neurons and myelinating pathways. It is a sensitive period for cultural learning.
Myelination, that is the insulation on the wires, right? Makes the signals go faster?
Exactly. The brain is locking in its adult configuration. Whatever you are doing during puberty, your brain says, "Oh, this is important. Let's build a superhighway for this." If you are playing sports and talking to friends, you build superhighways for social connection and physical coordination. If you are scrolling TikTok for 5 hours a day, you are building superhighways for short attention spans, social comparison, and dopamine addiction. We are literally wiring their brains to be anxious and distracted.
And the problem is, we are giving them the most addictive technology ever invented right at the start of this sensitive period. We are handing a bottle of whiskey to a kid whose liver is just forming.
And we stripped away the rites of passage that used to guide them. Haidt talks about how traditional societies had rituals to move kids from childhood to adulthood: vision quests, bar mitzvahs, tests of skill. These rituals involved community, mentorship, and often overcoming a challenge. What is our rite of passage now? Getting your first smartphone at age 10. That is it. That is the portal. But it is a portal to nowhere, with no guide.
Okay, I am sufficiently terrified. We have broken childhood. But Haidt isn't just a doomsayer. He has a plan. He calls for collective action. Because as a parent, I feel helpless. If I take my kid's phone away, they are socially isolated because everyone else is on the phone. It is a trap.
It is a collective action problem? Exactly. If only you do it, your kid loses. If everyone does it, everyone wins. Haidt proposes 4 specific norms. 4 rules that, if we all adopted them, could reverse this trend in 2 years. Are you ready for them?
Hit me.
Norm number 1. No smartphones before high school. Give them a basic flip phone or a smartwatch if you need to call them, but no internet in their pocket until roughly age 14. Let them get through the early awkward years of middle school without the pressure of an online brand.
That seems doable. 14 is a good age. What is number 2?
Norm number 2. No social media until 16. Let the brain solidify a bit more. Let them develop a secure identity in the real world before they enter the meat grinder of algorithmic judgment. The law currently says 13, which is a joke. It needs to be 16.
I can see the teenagers revolting, but honestly, the science backs it up. Number 3?
phone-free schools. And he doesn't mean keep it in your backpack. He means locked pouches or lockers from the first bell to the last bell. If a kid has a phone in their pocket, even on silent, their attention is fragmented. They are waiting for the buzz. And at lunch? If they have phones, they aren't talking. They are looking down. Schools need to be oases of attention and real social connection.
I love that. The school day should be offline. And the fourth?
Far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. This is the trade-off. If we take away the phones, we have to give them their lives back. We have to stop helicopter parenting. We have to let them walk to the park. We have to let them get bored, so they invent games. We have to trust them to be anti-fragile.
It sounds like we need to be brave. We need to stop overprotecting them in the real world and start protecting them in the virtual world. It is the exact opposite of what we have been doing for 30 years.
That is the message of the anxious generation. We made a mistake. We sent our kids to Mars, but the ship hasn't launched permanently yet. We can bring them back to Earth. We just have to be willing to act together, to close the portal, and to open the front door.
Sarah, this has been an eye-opener. Terrifying, but hopeful. It makes me want to go buy a flip phone and tell my kids to go play in the dirt. Thank you for walking us through this.
My pleasure, Alex. Let's bring childhood back to Earth.